Heyo everybody, Zian over here from Nintendo Life, and today we're here to share with you a preview of the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles on the Nintendo Switch. Now this preview was put together by the fantastic Kate Gray for NintendoLife.com, but I just merely added my voice to her words. So if nobody has any objections, let's get on with it. It's been 6 years since the release of The Great Ace Attorney in Japan, and in that time, although a fan translation was made, the game was never released in the West. Many people speculated as to the reason. One, it's hard to localize. It relies on the player having basic Japanese historical and cultural knowledge. And two, there are some just flat-out copyright issues. But now, at last, we have the prequel to Phoenix Wright's adventures in our hands, and we have the answers. It was all of those things and more. The question now, though, is did the Ace Attorney localization team, which is one of the best in the business, pull it off despite all of those difficulties? The Great Ace Attorney has no problem picking up where Spirit of Justice left off, with 3D modeled characters, fully animated intros, and incredibly detailed backgrounds. There is an undeniable charm in the little specifics of each character, especially with the new protagonist, who is actually an ancestor of our old pal Phoenix Wright, Ryunosuke Naruhodo, whose nervousness, ineptitude, and general clumsiness are portrayed by his darting eyes and his oversized lawyer armband constantly slipping down. Ryunosuke is immediately likable, quickly quelling any worries we had about how this newbie would stand up to Phoenix and Apollo, who we've known for years. His Maya equivalent sidekick Susato is a fiery, traditional, and incredibly knowledgeable teen, but her characterization so far has been a little flat in comparison to Ryunosuke. If anything, she feels a little too close to Maya, despite seemingly not being related. Anyone who loves the series will be hoping for the return of a few beloved features and tropes, terrible pun names, larger-than-life characters, intrigue and mystery, and a great deal of plot twists worthy of an Agatha Christie novel. And so we're pleased to say that all of these Ace Attorney standards are present. Although the pun names occasionally take a backseat to Sherlock Holmes references that are a little more obscure. Ace Attorney games also normally add a new gimmicky mechanic to the mix, and The Great Ace Attorney is no different, except perhaps in the fact that it adds multiple new mechanics, explained largely as, this is how they do things in England, which is where Ryunosuke finds himself after the first couple of cases. First off, there's the jury, who decide their verdict by punching fireballs into a comically large version of the scales of justice. And much like in Professor Layton vs. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, which this game is heavily inspired by, the witnesses now take the stand several at a time. Cramming the courtroom full of British criminals, witnesses, and members of the jury will give you the chance to pit their testimonies and thoughts against one another, and to point out when one witness is responding to another one's statement, alongside the usual press and present. During the investigation phase, Ryunosuke is also joined by Herlock Sholmes, a legally distinct detective whose character is somewhere between an excitable yet eccentric university professor and a cocker spaniel. He is fantastic, but Ryunosuke will be tasked with both reining in Sholmes and course-correcting his overzealous deductions. Overall, there are two main flaws with The Great Ace Attorney so far, and we've played up to case 3 in the first game. One is that it dumps a lot of learning, both mechanical and historical, on the player. New ideas and old facts jostle and vie for the player's attention and understanding in the first 3 cases, and this results occasionally in the player both feeling a bit overwhelmed and exhausted. It feels like a long, hand-holding tutorial that takes away from the genuinely interesting and exciting cases. The second flaw is less of a flaw with the game itself and more with its audience. The Great Ace Attorney relies on its players' knowledge more than any before, and that can often create a divide between its writing and Western players who don't have quite as much of an awareness of Japanese history and culture. The Great Ace Attorney draws heavily upon the relationship between Japan and Great Britain in the Meiji and Victorian eras. Japan is depicted as a country mired in traditionalism, looking to Great Britain to provide paternalistic direction. The Japanese characters, as a result, are treated quite poorly by the British, with a lot of casual racism thrown their way. Great Britain, at the peak of the British Empire, is quite fairly portrayed as a haughty, imperialistic country that, despite its advanced technology and legal system, is very backwards in its treatment of people, especially of the lower classes and foreigners. It's incredible that such a an honest, raw portrayal of how things were in the late 19th century made it into an Ace Attorney game, but the racism and mistreatment of the characters makes for a lot of stark and jarring moments. Ace Attorney has always been set in a semi-fictional, semi-ahistorical sort of world, where characters talk about magic underwear and samurai robots almost as much as they solve crimes, and everyone's super vague about whether they live in Japan or the US. Now that's not to say that there weren't some very serious cases and topics, but they were often contained to personal relationships and individual cases. But The Great Ace Attorney is far more exacting about its setting, and that comes with quite a bit of a change in tone as a result. However, from what we've played, we're excited about this new, but actually 6 years old direction that Ace Attorney is going in. What began as a series that was mildly critical of Japan's legal system, but was mostly about solving murders and making friends with Edgeworth, has evolved into a series that isn't afraid to make bold statements about geopolitical intrigue, a subject that has been on the docket since at least Ace Attorney Investigations' Miles Edgeworth. What remains to be seen, however, from further playing, is whether a game that relies pretty heavily on its Japanese audience's knowledge of their history can ever truly be localized to give Western players the full spectrum of events. The Great Ace Attorney is beautifully rendered, lovingly crafted, and masterfully written, but at times it feels a bit like watching a movie with the subtitles on. And despite a brilliant localization, that distance threatens to keep Western players away from a full appreciation of the game's themes and politics. We'll have more to say on the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles after we've played more of the game, so be sure to look out for our review in the future. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content like this, then why don't you go ahead and have a courtroom battle of your own with that subscribe button, and I hope you win. So that way you'll get to see our full review when it goes up. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Zion from Nintendo Life. Stay safe out there, and we will see you next time.